Have you ever loved someone who forgot you while chasing the world you helped them build? Tonight's story will remind you that even the strongest hearts break quietly before they finally walk away. Welcome back to Mr. Charles Stories, where every story uncovers the power of love, loss, and life lessons that change us. If you've ever been in love with someone who stopped noticing the small things, this one will speak to you. So sit back, listen close, and let this story take you where it hurts and heals. The Chicago skyline glowed under soft spring rain when Liana met Caden for the first time. She wasn't looking for anything special that night, just another client who wanted help decorating a penthouse. But the moment he walked into her office, the air changed. Caden carried the kind of confidence that made people move out of his way without him asking. Tall, sharp-featured, clean suit, eyes that looked like he'd already seen too much of life. He checked his phone, said something to his assistant, and finally looked up. Liana's calm presence stopped him mid-thought. No makeup, no designer labels, just beige linen pants, a silk top, and a calmness that didn't ask to be noticed, but was. She offered a simple smile. "Mr. Hartman, right? You said you wanted your home to feel like something. What exactly are you hoping to feel when you walk in?" That question silenced the billionaire. He expected her to ask about colors or budgets, not feelings. He blinked once, then said softly, "Peace, I guess." Liana nodded. "Then that's what we'll design for." And from that moment, Caden felt something he hadn't felt in years: stillness. Their first project meeting turned into coffee afterward. Their second meeting stretched into dinner. By the third, he cancelled 2 investor calls just to keep talking to her. She didn't flirt. She didn't chase. She listened. When he spoke about deadlines, she asked about rest. When he bragged about profit margins, she asked what they cost him personally. He told her once, half smiling, "You ask dangerous questions." She replied, "Only if you're scared of honest answers." That night, they stayed on the phone until dawn. Liana's friends noticed the shift before she did. She started dressing a little softer. She hummed while working. She began to cook again, something she'd stopped doing years before. And when Caden walked into her office, unannounced one afternoon holding 2 coffees, her assistant's eyes widened. The city's youngest real estate billionaire bringing coffee to a designer? That was headline-worthy. But Liana didn't see him as a headline. She saw a man who forgot to breathe. A year later, on a quiet Sunday evening, he proposed. No cameras, no extravagant setup. Just the 2 of them on her couch, her hair still damp from a shower, his tie thrown somewhere on the floor. He handed her tea, waited until she took a sip, then said, "I've never been more sure of anything." Her hand trembled slightly as he opened the velvet box. No speech, no rehearsed lines, only honesty. She whispered yes through a tear, not because she was surprised, but because she felt safe for the first time. They married 6 months later in a private garden behind his lake house. 30 guests, string lights, a jazz trio, and a breeze that smelled like peace. Every vow sounded like forever. The first year was perfect, or close to it. He worked, she designed. Nights were filled with laughter, messy kitchen experiments, and early morning cuddles before he left for meetings. When his company hit a record-breaking valuation, he lifted her off the ground and spun her in his office like they were still dating. That night, he told her, "You make me better." And she believed him. Because back then, he meant it. But success is a hungry thing. It asks for more than it gives. By their second anniversary, Caden was different. Phone calls became texts. Texts became silence. She'd set the table for 2. He'd call to say, "Order something without me." At first, she told herself it was temporary, that expansion always came with pressure. But pressure has a way of rewriting priorities. One Thursday night, she stayed up waiting. The city outside was asleep, but she couldn't. A single candle flickered on the dining table, untouched plates, cold pasta, untouched wine. When the elevator finally opened at 1 a.m., she looked up. He walked in, exhausted, tie loosened, eyes elsewhere. "Long day?" she asked softly. He nodded, half distracted. You didn't have to wait. Her smile faltered. I know. I wanted to. He brushed past her, kissed her forehead mechanically, and disappeared into the bedroom. Liana sat down, staring at the empty chair across from her. The silence between them grew thicker than the city air outside. The next morning, she left him a note in his briefcase. Don't forget breakfast. You used to love it. He texted a heart emoji around noon. That was all. By the next week, even that stopped. Months blurred. He traveled more often. Meetings in Seattle, contracts in New York, deals in Miami. Liana filled her time designing homes for people who believed she lived the dream. They envied her. She envied them. The couples who still shared jokes, who still reached for each other's hands. At night, she scrolled through old photos, him smiling in a kitchen. Her laughing mid-sentence, two shadows that once touched easily. Now, even their reflection in the mirror looked like strangers. One evening, she sat on the couch as the television played softly. Caden was upstairs on another call. His voice echoed faintly. Strong, persuasive, practiced. He sounded like the man everyone admired, not the one she married. Her chest tightened. She turned off the TV, walked into their shared bedroom, and opened the closet. Rows of his suits. Polished shoes. Expensive cologne. Everything organized. Everything perfect, except the love that used to fill the space. She sat on the edge of the bed and whispered to herself, Are we okay? He appeared in the doorway, phone still in hand. Of course, he said flatly. Why wouldn't we be? Her eyes searched his face for the softness that used to be there. It wasn't. He went back to his call. That was the night she realized she was married to a memory. A week later, her friend from the office called in disbelief. Liana, did you see this? A link followed. Photos. Caden at a charity gala. Black tuxedo, glass of wine in hand. Next to him, a woman from his marketing team. Young, stylish, laughing with her hand resting on his sleeve. Nothing scandalous. But enough. The caption read, The city's golden CEO spotted with his rumored new advisor. Her throat tightened. She didn't cry. She closed the laptop, placed her hand over her heart, and sat in silence. For hours she stayed like that, no screaming, no throwing things, just quiet. Because pain, when it's deep enough, doesn't explode. It sinks. When Caden came home that night, she didn't ask questions. He greeted her casually, kissed her cheek, and headed for the shower. She smiled faintly and said, Dinner's on the table. He paused, maybe noticing something different in her tone, but not enough to ask. Liana watched him disappear down the hallway. Then she blew out the candle on the table. That small flame had burned for 2 years, every night, waiting for him. That night, she decided to stop waiting. The next morning, sunlight filled the penthouse, but warmth didn't. Liana moved quietly through the kitchen, barefoot, robe tied at the waist. She placed a mug beside Caden's laptop, his usual black coffee, no sugar. He looked up briefly. Thanks. She nodded and turned away. That was their conversation for the day. By noon, the housekeeper arrived, humming softly as she dusted the hall. The sound reminded Liana of what silence had become, a permanent guest in their home. Her phone buzzed. A client in Savannah wanted updates on a design concept. Liana smiled, grateful for the distraction. Work didn't ask why her eyes were tired. It didn't notice the space beside her in bed. While sketching on her tablet, she glanced at the framed photo on the counter. Their wedding day. She was laughing. Caden had been looking at her, not the camera. That detail once melted her. Now it hurt. She whispered, Where did that version of us go? Later that evening, Caden returned home later than usual. His jacket hung carelessly over the couch, phone pressed to his ear. He spoke in that smooth, businesslike tone, confident, controlled, detached. Tell them to move the proposal to Tuesday, he said, and confirm dinner at 11 tomorrow. Dinner. Liana's heart paused at the word. She wondered if it was another client, another investor, or another face she didn't know. He ended the call, and noticed her standing by the window. "You're still up?" "I couldn't sleep." He gave a half smile. "You think too much. I used to think we did things together." The words slipped out before she could stop them. He stared at her, puzzled, almost offended by her honesty. "We still do, Liana. You're just busy with your work. I'm busy with mine. That's marriage." She tilted her head slightly. "No. That's scheduling." For a brief second, he looked like he wanted to say something deeper, but his phone buzzed again. He checked it, muttered, "We'll talk later," and walked away. The conversation ended like all their others, unfinished. That night, Liana lay awake staring at the ceiling. The city lights painted faint lines across the wall, like reminders of everything bright she'd lost. In the distance, she heard him talking softly into his phone again. The low tone, the chuckle. It was the same one he used to reserve for her. She turned over and faced the empty side of the bed. A tear slid down her temple, but she wiped it quickly, whispering to herself, "Don't break. Not tonight." The next morning, Caden left early. She woke to the sound of the elevator doors closing. His cologne lingered faintly, but it only made her stomach ache. On the counter sat a note written in his rushed handwriting. "Had to leave for a meeting. You're amazing. Don't forget lunch." 3 lines, all effort, no emotion. She folded it once and placed it in the drawer with the others. There were dozens now. The only love letters left in their marriage were reminders written out of guilt. Days turned to weeks. They functioned like polite roommates sharing expensive square footage. He worked. She filled her time with clients, sketches, and coffee with colleagues. One afternoon, while browsing the market for fabrics, her assistant mentioned a local gala. "Your husband's name is on the list. He's presenting the Innovator Award." Liana's smile didn't fade, but her heart did something strange. It didn't hurt anymore. That numbness scared her more than pain ever had. When the night of the gala arrived, she stayed home. She made soup, wore sweatpants, and watched a movie alone. Around midnight, her phone pinged. It was a notification, social media highlights from the event. She scrolled, expecting to see the same polished photos, handshakes, speeches, cameras flashing. But one image froze her. Caden, laughing, and beside him, a woman in a shimmering emerald dress, her hand brushing his sleeve as they leaned close. The caption beneath it read, "CEO Caden Hartman seen sharing a private joke with a guest during the award dinner." Liana stared at the screen, breathing shallowly. No context, no proof, just enough to hurt. She locked her phone and set it down. Then she whispered, "He's gone, isn't he?" Instead of crying, she stood and began washing the dishes. Soap bubbles covered her hands. The sound of running water filled the space where their laughter used to live. Each glass she rinsed felt like a memory being cleaned away. When she finished, she wiped the counter, turned off the lights, and walked to the bedroom. In the dark, she lay still. No tears, no rage, only the quiet understanding that love shouldn't feel this lonely. The following morning, she found him at the kitchen table. He was scrolling through emails, expression unreadable. "Morning," she said. "Morning," he replied. "Big night?" He looked up. "The gala?" "Yeah. Long one. You looked happy." He froze for half a second, then shrugged. "You saw pictures?" She nodded. "Everyone did." He set his phone down. "Liana, it's business. Don't make it something else." Her tone stayed calm. "I'm not making it anything. I'm observing." "Observing what?" he asked, irritation creeping in. "The way you smile differently now." The air thickened between them. Caden exhaled slowly, stood, and reached for his jacket. "I don't have time for this." Liana watched him leave. The elevator doors closed. She stood in silence, the hum of the refrigerator the only thing left keeping her company. That night, she didn't wait for him. She poured herself a glass of wine, sat on the couch, and stared at the skyline. The city below glittered with thousands of lights, each one a reminder of stories unfolding, hearts connecting, lives being lived. And here she was, existing quietly in the shadow of a love that used to shine. Her reflection in the window looked foreign, older, wiser, lonelier. She took a deep breath and whispered, "Maybe it's time to stop begging for love that doesn't want to stay." The next morning, the sun broke through heavy clouds. She stood by the window, phone in hand, scrolling through photos of design, projects, clients smiling, families laughing in homes she created. Every picture showed warmth she no longer felt. She realized she'd spent years designing peace for others while living in quiet chaos herself. That irony hit deep. She placed her phone down, picked up her sketchbook, and began drawing again, not for a client, but for herself. She drew a simple space, wide windows, soft curtains, one armchair facing the sunrise, a place for new beginnings. That drawing would later become her next project, a metaphor for her life. That evening, she stood at their bedroom mirror, brushing her hair when she heard his voice from the living room. He was laughing on the phone again. The tone was familiar, that playful low register he once reserved only for her. She stared at her reflection and said quietly, "Never again." Not in anger, in acceptance. She went to bed early that night, alone, without saying goodnight. When he came in hours later, she pretended to sleep. He paused by the bed, looking at her for a moment, then turned away. That was when she knew he saw her, but no longer looked at her, and that difference changed everything. The next day, Liana went about her routine as usual. Work, meetings, design proposals. But something inside her had already shifted. Love had turned into observation. Marriage had turned into performance. She had become a background detail in the life of a man she once believed would never stop choosing her. That night, she received another notification, a reminder for Caden's upcoming dinner reservation. It was on his shared calendar. She wasn't supposed to see it, but she did. A private dinner. Downtown. For two. Liana stared at the screen, calm and composed. She didn't cry. She didn't confront him. Instead, she wrote down the restaurant's name, folded the paper, and placed it in her purse. Then she exhaled, long, steady, deliberate. It was the sound of a woman who had finally reached the edge of patience and the beginning of power. The following week unfolded like any other, at least on the surface. Caden left early, returned late, and filled every silence with talk about business, growth, investor dinners, and expansion strategies that no longer included her. Liana didn't interrupt anymore. She stopped asking who he was meeting, what city he'd be flying to, or why his voice softened when he took late calls on the balcony. Instead, she watched, listened, and learned the rhythm of her own detachment. Every morning, she brewed 2 cups of coffee. He took his and left without tasting it. She drank hers slowly, in silence, by the kitchen window. The apartment had never been cleaner, but it had never felt emptier. One evening, she returned home from a client presentation to find his jacket tossed across the couch and his phone charging on the table. The calendar app blinked faintly, a synced reminder that belonged to both of them. One he probably forgot was still shared. Dinner, Tuesday, 8 p.m., Ravel's, table for 2. Liana froze. Ravel's wasn't a casual place. It was intimate, exclusive. The same restaurant where they celebrated their first anniversary. Her chest tightened, but her expression stayed calm. She sat down, staring at the glowing screen, tracing the letters of the reservation name with her fingertip. Caden always used his full name for reservations, Caden Hartman for 2, and she wasn't the second. She didn't slam the phone. She didn't cry. She didn't confront him when he came home that night, smelling faintly of expensive perfume that wasn't hers. Instead, she smiled and asked, "How was your day?" He looked relieved by her calmness, as if her silence granted him freedom. "Busy," he said, loosening his tie. "There's a dinner tomorrow night. Business thing." She nodded. "At Ravel's?" His body stiffened. For a second, he looked at her, searching, maybe realizing she knew. But the arrogance of habit took over. "Yeah. You know how these events are." Liana's voice stayed gentle. "Of course. You always have those." He relaxed, thinking he'd escaped another conversation. He kissed her forehead distractedly and went upstairs. She stood in the living room, staring after him, and in that quiet moment, she decided something without words. She would not cry over him again. She would not beg for explanations. She would not fight for space in a life that had no room for her. Instead, she would remind him of what he threw away, not with shouting, but with presence. The next morning, she called Ravel's. "Good afternoon," she said softly. "This is Miss Liana Ross. I'd like to make a dinner reservation for tomorrow at 8. The hostess replied politely, "Let me check availability. We do have a few tables left." "For how many guests?" "2, she said. "And please, if possible, seat us right next to Mr. Caden Hartman's table." There was a pause on the line. The hostess hesitated, but confirmed, "Certainly, Ms. Ross. We'll make that arrangement." Liana thanked her and hung up, a faint, steady heartbeat pulsing through her chest. Her hands didn't shake. Her breath didn't break. Something inside her had shifted from pain to control. That afternoon, she sat in her home office with her laptop open. The screen displayed old design files, the first project she'd ever done for Caden's company. His praise still echoed in her head. "You make spaces feel alive." Now, the irony of it stung. She gave life to everything she touched, except their marriage. The thought didn't break her, it centered her. She opened a new folder, titled it Savannah Expansion, and began working. A plan she'd kept buried for months started taking shape again. A second branch for her design firm. New clients, new city, new start. As she worked, her phone buzzed. A message from Darius. "How are you holding up, Liana?" She smiled faintly. Darius never pried, never pushed. He had been a steady friend, quiet, reliable, kind. He was an architect she'd collaborated with before, and over time, he had become the one person who saw the loneliness she tried to hide. She typed back, "I'm fine. Thank you." He replied a minute later, "Fine doesn't suit you. You used to say you were alive." Her hand paused on the keyboard. Alive. That word struck something deep. She thought for a moment, then typed, "Maybe I forgot how." There was a pause, then another message from him. "Then let me remind you, starting with dinner tomorrow." She exhaled slowly, her lips curving slightly. "Tomorrow? Yes. I'll pick the place." She looked at the folded note on her counter, the one with Ravel's 8 p.m. written in her handwriting. Her fingers hovered over the phone. Then she replied, "You don't have to pick. I already have somewhere in mind." The next day came quietly, the kind of morning that felt like a deep inhale before a storm. Caden rushed out after breakfast. He didn't notice the calm in her eyes or the absence of questions. He didn't notice she wasn't wearing her ring. By evening, Liana stood before the mirror. The woman staring back wasn't the same one who used to wait by the window. Her hair was pinned in a low, elegant twist. A soft black dress hugged her figure, not loud, not daring, but quietly commanding. Gold earrings framed her face, catching the light like they'd been waiting for this night. She looked beautiful, but more importantly, she looked unshaken. For years, she had tried to earn attention. Tonight, she didn't need to. At 7:30, she met Darius in the lobby. He looked at her for a moment, no words, just quiet appreciation. "You look," he started, then stopped himself. "Peaceful," she smiled. "Thank you." As the driver opened the door, Darius offered his hand. "Ready?" Liana took it, more than ever. The car moved through downtown Chicago, the skyline alive with city lights and passing reflections. Her pulse was steady, her heart calm. Darius glanced at her. "Are you sure you want to do this?" She turned her head, her voice steady. "I'm not doing it to hurt anyone. I'm doing it to remind myself I'm still here." He nodded, understanding. At exactly 7:58 p.m., the car pulled up to Ravel's. The entrance shimmered under warm golden lights. Inside, waiters glided between tables set with white linens and quiet jazz playing in the background. When they stepped in, the hostess recognized her immediately. "Good evening, Ms. Ross. Your table is ready." She led them across the room. As they walked, Liana's heels clicked softly against the marble floor, steady, rhythmic, confident. Halfway there, she saw him, Caden, sitting at a table near the center, navy suit, cufflinks gleaming under the light. Across from him, a woman in a deep green dress, laughing softly, her hand brushing his wrist. Time seemed to slow. Darius glanced at her. "You good?" Liana smiled faintly. "Perfect." The hostess gestured to the next table. "Here you are." Liana sat gracefully, facing directly toward the man who once promised her forever. Caden looked up from his menu, casual at first, until his gaze froze. His jaw tightened. His fingers stiffened on the edge of the table. For a brief second, disbelief clouded his eyes. Then, recognition. Then something close to panic. Liana met his gaze and smiled, polite, poised, unbothered. Darius poured wine, his tone low and gentle. "It's a beautiful night." "Yes," Liana said softly, her eyes still on Caden. "It really is." Across the room, Caden's date followed his line of sight and frowned slightly. "Do you know her?" He cleared his throat. "No, I don't think so." But the tremor in his voice betrayed him. Liana laughed at something Darius said, a soft, genuine laugh she hadn't used in years. That sound carried across the tables like a melody of freedom. Caden tried to focus on his plate, but every second that passed made his chest feel tighter. His fork clinked against the glass. His eyes flicked back to her again. The waiter approached his table, asking something, but he didn't answer. He could only hear her voice, low, calm, alive. The very thing he'd stopped listening for was now the only thing he could hear. The restaurant was warm with low golden light, the hum of quiet conversations weaving through the air. Wine glasses clinked softly. Jazz played in the background, smooth and slow. Liana's presence altered the room. She didn't need to make an entrance, she became one. Caden's hand tightened around his fork as he tried to pretend she wasn't sitting just a few steps away. His date spoke, her voice light and effortless, but her words didn't reach him. Every laugh, every tilt of her head reminded him of what Liana once did. Only hers had meant something. Now, the sound of Liana's laughter drifted from the next table, quiet but unignorable. It hit him like déjà vu, familiar, haunting, irreplaceable. Darius leaned in slightly, his tone smooth and low. "So," he said, "tell me what peace looks like to you now." Liana smiled faintly. "I used to think peace meant stability. Now, I think it means silence that doesn't hurt." Her words were soft, but every syllable found its mark in the man sitting across the aisle. Caden's knife slipped against his plate. His date paused. "Are you okay?" He nodded, but his face betrayed him. His eyes kept moving, always back to her. When the waiter arrived to refill their wine, Caden's gaze followed. Every movement, the glass, the bottle, her fingers against the stem. She didn't look his way, not once. That small act of restraint wounded his pride more than any fight could have. He cleared his throat, pretending to check his watch, but his focus never shifted. "Is that her?" The woman beside him asked quietly, catching the way his eyes refused to stay still. He hesitated. "Who? The woman you're looking at every 2 minutes?" He froze, then lied. "I don't know what you mean." She smiled, not kindly. "You do. I may not know her, but you do. I think everyone in this room can feel it." Her voice stayed light, but her meaning was sharp. He looked down at his plate. "It's complicated." "No," she said, gathering her clutch. "It's over. That's what it looks like." She stood, her heels echoing softly as she left. Caden didn't move. For a moment he just sat there, alone, drowning in the kind of silence he'd once forced on his wife. At the next table, Liana's hand rested gently against the rim of her glass. She'd noticed the woman leaving but didn't gloat. Her expression stayed calm, graceful, untouchable. Darius watched quietly, understanding the weight of her stillness. He said softly, "He's looking at you like he's seeing his own mistake." Liana replied, "Then maybe he's finally paying attention." Minutes passed. The air around them thickened with tension, unspoken, but deeply felt. Caden stood slowly, unable to sit anymore. He straightened his jacket and walked toward her table, each step measured, hesitant. Darius turned, ready to speak, but Liana touched his hand, a gentle sign that she had it handled. Caden stopped beside their table. "Liana," he said, voice low. She looked up, meeting his gaze calmly. "Caden." Her tone was polite, detached, the same way she spoke to clients she'd already decided not to work with again. "Can we talk?" he asked. "Now." "Yes." Darius glanced up, his tone even but protective. "She's having dinner." Caden ignored him. "Just 5 minutes." Liana set her glass down. "You've had years, Caden. What's 5 minutes now going to fix?" His voice cracked slightly. "I didn't know you'd be here." She smiled faintly. "I did." He looked lost. "You planned this?" "I planned to stop disappearing in my own marriage." Her calmness disarmed him more than anger ever could. "Please," he said, his tone softer now. "Can we step outside?" Darius shifted, ready to speak, but Liana rose slowly, her composure flawless. "It's fine," she said to Darius. "I'll be back." They stepped out into the hallway between the dining room and the bar, private but still within view of others. Caden rubbed the back of his neck. "You didn't have to do that." "You could have told me," she interrupted gently. "Told you what? That you stopped coming home? That I learned about your dinners through the concierge?" He exhaled sharply. "It's not what you think." She folded her arms. "Then tell me what it is. I've been under pressure. The company's expanding. Investors. Stop." Her voice was low, firm. Not cruel but final. "You're explaining your choices, not apologizing for them." He went quiet. Liana continued. "You didn't lose me tonight, Caden. You lost me the night you stopped noticing me. I just happened to realize it now." He swallowed hard, guilt flashing across his face. "I made mistakes, but you walking in here with someone else made you look at me again." She finished softly. "That's the difference between us. You needed competition to remember what you had. I needed peace to remember who I am." Caden stared at her, the noise of the restaurant fading around them. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't cry. She stood there, perfectly still, like a woman who'd made peace with her pain. "I still love you," he said finally, desperate, almost whispering. She tilted her head slightly. "You loved the idea of me, the quiet, the support, the home that waited for you. But when the noise stopped serving you, you left." He looked down, his jaw clenched. "So that's it?" "Yes," she said softly. "That's peace." She turned and walked away, leaving him standing beneath the dim light, surrounded by everything he built and nothing he understood. When she returned to the table, Darius stood. He looked at her face, reading the silence. "You okay?" She smiled faintly. "I'm free." They finished dinner, talking about simple things, travel, work, a new project she wanted to pitch. Her laughter returned, lighter now, genuine. Caden stayed at his table long after they left, staring into the empty chair across from him. The irony wasn't lost on him. He had all the luxury in the world, and not a single person left to share it with. Back at her apartment, Liana removed her earrings, one at a time, and placed them on the dresser. The city lights shimmered through the window, soft and distant. Her reflection in the mirror didn't look broken. It looked awake. She whispered quietly, almost like a prayer, "Thank you for showing me how far I could go once I stopped waiting." That night, she slept without checking the time, without wondering when the elevator would chime or whose perfume would follow. For the first time in years, her dreams were quiet. Not empty, peaceful. If you've ever loved someone who made you feel invisible, tell me in the comments. Would you have walked away like Liana, or waited one more night hoping they'd change? Your story might help someone watching right now. And if this moment spoke to you, tap like, share, and subscribe so more people can feel what you felt tonight on Mr. Charles' Stories. The next morning came quietly. Sunlight slipped through the curtains of the penthouse, soft but cold. Liana woke alone. The sheets beside her were untouched, the pillow still perfectly smooth. Proof he hadn't come home. For the first time, she didn't wonder where he was. She simply stared at the ceiling, her thoughts calm, her chest still. There was nothing left to question. Downstairs, the apartment looked spotless, but every detail whispered memories. The table where they once shared late dinners, the couch where she'd fallen asleep waiting. The small candle holder he once said reminded him of her, simple, warm, and steady. Now, that candle sat unused, covered in a thin layer of dust. She walked past it without lighting it. At 8:13 a.m., her phone buzzed. "Caden, I didn't sleep last night. I shouldn't have said those things. We need to talk." She read the messages slowly. Not one of them said sorry. She placed the phone down, went to the kitchen, and poured herself coffee. The bitterness didn't sting. She'd grown used to it. A few minutes later, another text came. "I'm coming home early. Let's fix this." Her eyes lingered on the word fix. Fix, as if love were a contract, as if promises were repairable with convenience. She didn't reply. Instead, she turned on some soft music, the kind she used to play while sketching, and opened her laptop. The folder labeled Savannah Expansion glowed faintly on her screen. Inside it were blueprints, color schemes, and drafts she'd been quietly perfecting for months. For the first time, she didn't design for a client. She designed for herself. She was building a life that didn't revolve around someone else's shadow. By afternoon, she'd made her decision. She booked a one-way flight to Savannah for the weekend, not to escape, but to start over. Her assistant could handle the transition. Her clients would understand. She packed slowly, one drawer at a time, not in anger, not in haste, with care, as if closing a chapter deserved tenderness, not rage. When the elevator chimed later that evening, she knew it was him. The rhythm of his steps was unmistakable, confident, but heavy. "Liana?" he called out. She didn't answer. He found her in the living room, suitcase by her side. "What are you doing?" he asked, his tone caught between disbelief and panic. "Leaving," she said softly. His face tightened. "For how long?" "For good." He stepped closer. "You can't be serious." "I am. This is because of that night." She smiled faintly. "No. That night only showed me what I already knew." He dragged a hand through his hair. "Liana, don't do this. We've had a rough few months, but I can fix this." She shook her head. "You can't fix something you never noticed breaking." He exhaled sharply. "So that's it? You're walking away?" "Yes," she said, "because staying would mean teaching you how to love me again, and I shouldn't have to." For the first time in years, Caden was silent. The man who could convince anyone in a boardroom stood wordless before the woman who once adored him. He took a step closer. "There's someone else, isn't there?" She met his eyes, calm and steady. "No. There's just me." He swallowed. "And him?" "Darius?" she said quietly. "He showed up when you stopped showing up. That's the difference." His jaw tensed. "So you're running to him?" "I'm walking toward peace." The room went still. Outside, the city moved as always. Traffic lights, voices, life continuing. Inside, everything felt like an ending wrapped in quiet grace. Caden looked around as if realizing this space, the one she'd built, no longer belonged to him emotionally. He said, almost pleading, "You can't throw everything away over one mistake." She tilted her head. "One mistake doesn't end love, Caden. Repetition does." His eyes softened for the first time in months. "Liana, please, don't do this. I miss you." She smiled sadly. "You miss who I was, when you didn't have to notice me." He tried again. "We can start over." She nodded slowly. "We can. Just not together." She reached for her suitcase handle, but he grabbed her wrist. "Please," he whispered. "Stay." Her eyes met his, gentle but firm. "Caden, the problem was never that I didn't stay. It's that you never came home." She pulled free. The elevator chimed again, waiting. He didn't follow. Downstairs, the air outside felt lighter. She walked out into the city night, suitcase rolling softly over the pavement. The wind brushed her face, cool and refreshing, like a quiet blessing. She whispered to herself, "I'm done begging for someone to remember I exist." That night, she checked into a small hotel near the river, simple, quiet, peaceful. She sat by the window, looking at the skyline she'd once admired from their penthouse. From here, it looked different, softer, distant, less intimidating. Her phone buzzed again. She didn't pick it up. For the first time, silence felt like freedom, not punishment. The next morning, she wrote an email to her assistant. Transfer all active projects to the Savannah office, effective immediately. Then she signed the divorce papers she'd already drafted weeks earlier. No drama, no anger, just release. When she dropped the envelope into the courier box, her hands didn't tremble. It was done. Inside was her signature, her closure, and a quiet promise to herself. Never again would she settle for half love. Later that afternoon, she stood by the river as the city reflected across the water. Her reflection looked steady, whole. She whispered, "Peace looks good on me." That night, she turned off her phone, poured herself a small glass of wine, and finally exhaled. Caden had spent years chasing power. She had spent those same years holding her breath. Now both were learning what loss really meant. For him, it was control. For her, it was fear, and she was finally free of both. The next morning, she boarded a train bound for Savannah. The whistle echoed through the platform, long and deep, like a signal for a new beginning. She looked out the window as the city faded behind her, replaced by trees, sunlight, and the promise of something better. In her lap was her sketchbook. She turned to a blank page and wrote 3 words at the top, "Designing peace again." The train rolled into Savannah just as dawn colored the sky. Soft pink light brushed the rooftops, and the air carried a gentleness Chicago had long forgotten. Liana stepped onto the platform with one suitcase and a single plan: to start breathing again. Her shoes touched the old cobblestone street. The air smelled like salt and magnolia. It felt like a quiet welcome. She hailed a cab and leaned against the window as the city came alive. Cafes opened their doors. Neighbors waved to one another. Life moved slower here, as if time had finally agreed to wait for her. Her new office sat above a flower shop on Whitaker Street, small, bright, full of potential. 2 rooms, 1 assistant, and a big window that let in golden morning light. She unlocked the door, inhaled deeply, and whispered, "Let's begin." The first few weeks passed in calm rhythm. She took on small projects, a bakery renovation, a family's living room redesign. Unlike her work in Chicago, there were no investors, no high-rise pressure, no competition for recognition. Each design came from heart and purpose, not deadlines and status, and little by little the city began to feel like hers. She spent her weekends at the local farmers market, where strangers became familiar faces. She'd stop for coffee at a small shop that smelled like roasted almonds and comfort. That's where she saw him again, Darius. He was standing near the counter, hair slightly tousled, a blueprint rolled under one arm. "Chicago finally let you go," he said with a grin. She smiled. "It didn't let me go. I walked out." "Even better," he said. "Then welcome home." His words weren't romantic, not yet, but they carried warmth she hadn't felt in years. They began meeting occasionally, at first for work. He had architectural projects that needed interior collaboration. Her designs brought his structures to life. They made a strong team, quietly in sync, both driven but never hurried. One afternoon, as they reviewed plans in a sunlit cafe, Darius looked at her and said, "You design peace like someone who lost it once." She met his gaze, thoughtful. "I did." He nodded softly. "And you found it again." She smiled faintly. "I'm still finding it." Their friendship grew naturally. No rush, no expectations. Darius never pried about her past. He didn't ask why she avoided questions about love. He simply showed up, with coffee when she worked late, with silence when she needed space. If Caden had been a storm that swept her away, Darius was the calm that let her breathe. One evening, after finishing a project presentation, he walked her to her car. The streets were quiet, lined with old oak trees and amber streetlights. "You know," he said softly, "you don't have to keep proving how strong you are." She looked at him. "What makes you think I'm trying to?" "The way you never let anyone carry anything for you," he said. "Even the heavy boxes." She smiled faintly. "Old habits. Independence keeps me safe." He nodded. "Maybe. But sometimes safety looks like allowing someone else to care." The words lingered long after he left. A month later, her firm received a major local award for design excellence, her first in years. Her assistant insisted they celebrate, and Darius joined them. That night, surrounded by laughter and warm lights, Liana realized something simple but powerful. She was happy again. Not the kind of happiness that depended on anyone else, the quiet kind that came from peace. When the evening ended, Darius walked her home. As they reached her door, he paused. "You look lighter." She smiled. "I feel lighter." He hesitated, then asked, "Can I tell you something?" "Sure." He looked down, almost shy. "When I first met you, I thought your silence meant distance. Now I see it means grace." Her chest tightened, not from pain, but from recognition. She said quietly, "I used to think silence meant weakness. Now I know it's power." Days turned into weeks. Their work partnership grew closer. Their friendship deepened. Sometimes, when she laughed, he'd glance at her as if memorizing the sound. Sometimes, when he spoke, she'd study his calmness, the way he never rushed his words. There was no urgency, no expectation, no performance. It felt like breathing in fresh air after years of holding her breath. One evening, Liana stayed late at the office. The rain fell softly outside, tapping against the large windows. She was finalizing a concept sketch when the lights flickered. "Working this late again?" a familiar voice said. She turned. Darius stood at the door, holding 2 takeout bags. "I figured you'd forget dinner," he said. She laughed. "You're not wrong." He handed her a bag and pulled a chair beside her. They ate in quiet comfort, sharing bites and light jokes about clients who changed their minds too often. When the thunder rolled gently outside, Darius looked at her, his tone serious now. "Liana," he said, "you're building a beautiful life here." She smiled. "Trying to, then promise me something." "What?" "Don't go back to what made you forget yourself." Her fork froze halfway to her lips. She nodded slowly. "I won't." He leaned back, satisfied. "Good." Their eyes met, steady, unspoken, meaningful. In that silence, something new began. That night, when she got home, Liana looked around her quiet apartment. No tension, no waiting, no walking on eggshells. She poured tea, curled up on the couch, and exhaled deeply. For the first time in years, peace didn't feel foreign. It felt earned. The next morning, sunlight filled her space. Her phone buzzed. A message from Darius. "Don't forget, we're meeting at the project site at 10. Then another. "And get coffee. I'm buying breakfast." She smiled, typing back. "Deal. But only if you let me drive today." "Fine," he replied. "But I'm controlling the playlist." She laughed. Normal. Simple. Honest. That was what she'd been missing. Life without walking on broken glass. Later that day, as they drove across the bridge toward a new client site, Darius turned the radio down. "You know," he said, "I used to think love had to be loud to be real. You're teaching me it can be quiet and still matter." Liana looked at him, her voice soft. "And I'm learning love can return when you stop chasing it." They shared a glance that said everything words couldn't. The wind from the open window tangled her hair, and she didn't bother fixing it. She felt free. The days in Savannah had a rhythm that healed Liana without her noticing. Work, laughter, morning coffee, late sunsets. It wasn't dramatic, but it was peace, the kind that replaced pain without permission. She no longer checked her phone out of habit. She no longer replayed old arguments in her head. Her life had become lighter, grounded, and her reflection finally looked like someone who'd forgiven herself for staying too long. Darius became a familiar part of her days. Not loud, not demanding, but steady. He'd drop by her office with coffee, always the same order. 2 sugars, he'd say, setting it down on her desk. She'd smile, replying, "You remember. Architects never forget details," he'd tease. They'd sit together reviewing design sketches, sometimes talking, sometimes just working in comfortable silence. If Caden had filled the air with words, Darius filled it with calm. One Saturday morning, they met at a project site, an old coastal house a client wanted restored. The house sat near the edge of a cliff overlooking the sea. The wood faded and walls cracked, but the view, breathtaking. Liana stood by the balcony, wind brushing her hair, sunlight soft on her face. "It's broken," she said quietly, "but it has potential." Darius joined her, hands in his pockets. "Everything worth saving does." She looked at him. "Do you always talk like that, or are you trying to sound wise?" He laughed, low and warm. "Maybe both." She smiled, shaking her head. "You'd make a good therapist." "I prefer building things that don't fall apart," he said softly. The words hung between them, simple but full of meaning. As they worked, he asked about her ideas for the house. She spoke with her hands, her voice full of quiet passion. "See this part?" she said, pointing to the damaged balcony. "We'll rebuild it wider. Add glass rails so the view stays open. The ocean should feel like part of the house." Darius watched her. Not the plan, not the sketch, but her. The way her eyes lit up again. The way her confidence returned when she talked about her craft. "You sound like you love it again," he said. She blinked. "Love what?" "Creating," he replied. "You used to sound tired when you talked about it. Now you sound alive." She paused, then smiled softly. "Maybe I stopped designing for approval and started designing for peace," he said. She nodded. "Exactly." After hours of planning, they took a break by the shore. The ocean stretched endlessly, waves gentle and rhythmic. Liana sat on a rock, shoes off, letting the water touch her feet. Darius stood beside her, his pants rolled up, watching the tide. "It feels different here," she said, "like time slows down." He glanced at her. "Or maybe you finally stopped rushing it." She looked out toward the horizon. "Do you ever think about the people who hurt you?" "Sometimes," he said, "but not to blame them. Just to remember who I became because of them." She nodded slowly. "That's what I'm learning too." He smiled. "Then you're healing, right?" The wind picked up, carrying the scent of salt and sun. For a moment, neither spoke. The silence wasn't awkward, it was complete. When she looked at him, their eyes met and held. There was no performance, no chasing, no fear. Just understanding. He reached out and brushed a loose strand of hair from her face, gentle, unhurried. Her breath caught, not from surprise, but from how right it felt. "Darius," she whispered. He smiled faintly. "Don't overthink it. Some moments don't need meaning, they just need honesty." That evening, they stopped at a small seafood diner on their way back. The place was cozy, wooden tables, quiet jazz, and warm yellow light. They ordered grilled fish and lemonade, then talked about everything that wasn't heavy: favorite cities, funny client stories, childhood memories. Halfway through dinner, Darius looked at her and said, "You laugh more now." She smiled. "And you talk more because you listen," he said simply. It wasn't a compliment. It was an observation, one that landed deep. She lowered her gaze, her voice soft. "I used to talk a lot too. I think I stopped when I realized no one was hearing me." Darius leaned forward. "I hear you." The air between them shifted, quiet but charged. After dinner, he walked her to her car. The street was lined with oak trees, leaves glowing under soft lamps. As they stopped by her door, she turned to him. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For making the silence feel safe again." He smiled, his eyes warm. "Then promise me something." She tilted her head. "What?" "Don't go back to anyone who confuses peace with boredom." She nodded slowly. "Deal." When she got home that night, She sat by her window, the soft hum of Savannah's nightlife drifting in the distance. Her phone buzzed. A message from Caden. She stared at it for a few seconds, then opened it. "I miss you." No apology, no reflection, just longing dressed as regret. She stared at it until her chest felt tight. Then she hit delete. Her phone dimmed to black, reflecting only her face, calm, certain, free. The next morning, she texted Darius first for the first time. "Coffee today?" His reply came almost instantly. "Already on my way." She smiled. For the first time, reaching out didn't feel like losing herself. It felt like choosing connection again. Later that afternoon, as they worked side by side at the project site, she caught herself studying him. The way his brow furrowed when he focused. The way he treated every idea she shared as equal, not optional. He looked up suddenly, catching her stare. "What?" he asked, smiling. She blinked. "Nothing." He grinned. "Liana." That was definitely not nothing. She laughed. "You're imagining things." He leaned closer, teasing. "Maybe. Or maybe you finally stopped hiding behind work." She rolled her eyes. "Don't get ahead of yourself." He chuckled softly. "I'm an architect. I plan ahead for a living." Her laughter filled the room. Rich, genuine, alive. That night, as she locked up her office, her assistant said, "You've been smiling all day." "Good news?" Liana paused, thoughtful. "Not news, just peace." And as she stepped outside into the warm Savannah air, she realized that healing didn't come from forgetting who broke her. It came from remembering who she'd always been before the heartbreak. The following week unfolded like a slow song. Mornings came with sunlight spilling through her window and the familiar buzz of her phone. Darius reminding her to eat breakfast, teasing her for working too hard. Workdays stretched long but never lonely. He'd stop by with coffee or a new project sketch, always with that calm steadiness she'd come to count on. He never asked where she'd been emotionally. He simply stayed, the way she used to wish someone would. One afternoon, they drove out to a new site on the outskirts of the city, a small lakeside property a client wanted redesigned as a retreat home. The drive was quiet at first. Warm wind rushed through the open windows, carrying the scent of pine and water. Liana leaned back in her seat, eyes half closed. "You know what I love about this city?" Darius smiled. "Besides the coffee." She laughed. "Besides that, it lets you be quiet without asking what's wrong." He nodded. "That's rare." "It is," she said softly. "Most people don't notice the difference between silence and peace." He glanced at her briefly. "I do." Her chest tightened a little at that, not from pain but from recognition. At the site, they walked through the old cabin that overlooked the water. The air smelled of cedar and rain. Darius ran his fingers along the worn wooden beams. "It's got history," he said. Liana nodded. "It feels like something worth saving." "You sound like you're talking about more than the house," he said, his tone light but meaningful. She smiled faintly. "Maybe the first He turned to her, quiet for a moment, then said, "You've changed, you know. The woman I met in Chicago carried her pain like it was part of her skin. This one learned to shed it," she finished softly. He smiled. "Exactly." They spent the rest of the day sketching ideas on his tablet. Open floor plans, wide windows, natural textures. Their hands brushed once when they both reached for the stylus. Neither moved immediately. For a second, the air between them thickened, not uncomfortable, but heavy with something unnamed. Liana was the first to pull back. "Sorry, don't be," he said quietly. She looked out toward the lake, her heart steady but aware. "I didn't think I'd ever feel this again." "What?" he asked. "Curiosity," she said, "about someone else." He studied her face. "Then let it happen naturally. No pressure, no rush." She nodded. "I like that rule." "Good," he said with a grin, "because I'm planning to follow it too." Later that evening, they sat outside on the dock, feet dangling over the water. The sunset melted into shades of orange and pink, reflecting across the ripples. Liana exhaled softly. You know what the hardest part of starting over was? He looked at her. What? Learning to trust myself again. Darius nodded slowly. You don't have to rush that either. Sometimes the best part of healing is realizing you never stopped being worthy of love. You just stopped recognizing it. She turned to him, their eyes locking for a brief moment. Do you ever get tired of being the wise one? She teased. He chuckled. Only when you start pretending you don't already know these things. Her smile lingered, quiet and warm. When it started getting dark, they packed up their things and walked back toward the car. Halfway there, rain began to fall, light at first, then heavier. Liana laughed, holding her notebook above her head. Of course. Darius grabbed her hand, pulling her under a nearby tree. You okay? She nodded, breathless from laughing. I haven't run in the rain since college. He smiled. You should do it more often. Why? Because you look happy when you forget to be careful. Her laughter faded slowly, replaced by silence. Soft, aware, tender. Their faces were inches apart, raindrops gliding down their hair and clothes. He reached up, brushed a drop from her cheek with his thumb. You're shaking, he said. Maybe, she whispered. It's been a while since someone looked at me like that. His eyes softened. Then maybe I'll keep doing it until it feels normal again. He didn't kiss her. He didn't have to. That single sentence felt like enough. Back at her apartment, she stood before the mirror, towel around her shoulders, hair still damp. Her reflection looked different, not made up, not flawless, but alive. She traced the edge of the mirror with her fingers and whispered, Peace can be beautiful, but maybe love can be too. The next morning, Darius dropped by her office with 2 coffees as always. But this time, when she reached to take it, their hands lingered for a moment longer. Good morning, he said, his voice soft. She smiled. It is. The warmth between them wasn't sudden, it was earned, one gentle moment at a time. Later that week, they worked late again. The office was quiet except for the hum of her desk lamp. She yawned, stretching. You should go home. It's late. So should you, he said. She laughed. You first. He grinned. You're stubborn. I've been told. He leaned forward slightly, his eyes holding hers. I like that about you. She froze for a moment, not in fear but surprise. No one had said that to her in years without conditions attached. Thank you, she said quietly. You don't have to thank me, he replied. You deserve to hear it. That night, after he left, she stood by the window of her office, watching the city lights flicker against the dark sky. Her heart felt full, not with excitement or confusion, but with something steady and calm. It wasn't fireworks. It was warmth, the kind that stayed. Before bed, she texted him, Thanks for today. You make work feel easy. He replied minutes later, You make peace look effortless. She smiled, set her phone down, and lay back against the pillow. Her mind didn't replay what went wrong. It drifted to what was quietly going right. A week later, they finished the final design for the lake house. As they presented it to the client, Darius couldn't stop glancing at her. She noticed, but didn't call him out. When the client left, he said softly, You know, I think this might be one of our best projects. She smiled. Because it's ours. He nodded. And because you're finally designing from happiness again. That evening, he invited her for dinner. Nothing fancy, just homemade pasta at his place. When she walked in, soft jazz played in the background, and the smell of garlic and herbs filled the air. You cook, she teased. He laughed. Architects can follow instructions. Mostly. She smiled, sitting at the table as he poured wine. The setting wasn't perfect. A mismatched plate, one candle, and a laugh between them that filled the room better than any music could. After dinner, they sat on his balcony overlooking the quiet savannah streets. The city hummed softly below, life continuing in gentle rhythm. Darius leaned back, glancing at her. You know what's funny? What? I used to think love had to hurt to mean something. You're proving me wrong. She smiled faintly. And I used to think peace meant being alone. You're proving me wrong too. They sat there in silence, the kind that said everything words couldn't. For the first time in years, Liana didn't feel like a woman recovering from heartbreak. She felt like a woman rediscovering love, slowly, safely, beautifully. 2 months passed in quiet balance. Liana's design firm in Savannah was thriving. Clients doubled, and her smile had stopped looking practiced. She'd built a rhythm that finally made sense. Coffee in the morning, site visits with Darius, dinners that turned into slow conversations about everything and nothing. The past had stopped haunting her, until one morning it came back with a single email. She was reviewing invoices at her desk when her assistant, Eva, stepped in holding a tablet. "Liana," she said, hesitant. "You should see this." Liana frowned slightly. "What is it?" Eva turned the screen toward her. A headline from a Chicago business magazine glowed across the top. "Hartman Holdings expands south. New Savannah branch expected to open this year." Beneath it was a photo of Caden, sharp suit, confident smile, standing beside a glass building. For a moment, Liana forgot to breathe. "Are they serious?" she whispered. Eva bit her lip. "Looks like they're coming here." Liana leaned back in her chair, her fingers lightly pressing her temple. Of all cities, of all places, it had to be this one. Her peace, her escape, was about to share a skyline with her past. That evening, Darius noticed the quiet in her eyes during their meeting. "You okay?" he asked softly. She nodded, but he didn't believe it. "Liana." She exhaled slowly, showing him the article. He read it, then looked at her carefully. "That's him?" She nodded once. Darius set the tablet down, his tone calm but firm. "You don't owe him your peace, no matter what he's doing." "I know," she said. "It's just strange. For months I built a life that didn't include him. Now he's moving into my city. Then make sure he only moves into your city, not your head," Darius replied. His words hit the center of her anxiety. She smiled faintly. "You always know how to reframe things. Architects," he said, smiling softly. "We rebuild what collapses." But later that night, lying in bed, she couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw that headline. Caden's name beside the city she'd come to love. It wasn't fear. It wasn't love. It was something else. The quiet discomfort of knowing that healing sometimes has to stand next to what broke it. The next morning she went for a walk by the river. The air was cool, her coffee warm in her hands. She thought about how far she'd come, from empty penthouse nights to mornings like this, full of peace and purpose. She wasn't going to let one headline take that away. Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "I heard you're in Savannah. I'd like to talk." She froze, staring at the screen. There was no name, but she didn't need one. Her heartbeat stayed calm, but her jaw tightened. She typed back slowly. "There's nothing left to talk about." Then she hit block. Later that day, she told Darius about the message. He looked concerned. "You sure you're okay?" She nodded. "I am. He doesn't get to interrupt my life anymore." Darius studied her face. "I believe you. But if he tries again, tell me." "I will," she said softly. Then she added with a half smile, "You're protective." He shrugged lightly. "When peace finally arrives, you protect it." She looked at him for a long moment, her expression softening. "You make it sound easy." "It's not," he said. "But it's worth it." That night, they met friends for dinner downtown. Liana laughed easily, shared stories, and for most of the night, she didn't think about Caden at all. But as they walked back to the parking lot, she caught sight of a familiar silhouette. Across the street, tall, tailored suit, standing beside a black car. Her steps faltered. It couldn't be. The man turned. Caden. Their eyes met across the traffic lane. Time didn't stop. It slowed. He didn't move toward her. He just watched. Expression unreadable, as if unsure whether to smile or apologize. Darius noticed immediately. He followed her gaze, jaw tightening. "Do you want to leave?" he asked. Liana's eyes stayed locked on Caden. "No. I want to live." She turned her head calmly, slid her hand into Darius's, and kept walking. Caden didn't follow, but his silence followed her all the way home. The next morning, Savannah buzzed with news. Business owners talking about new investors, potential developments, expansion plans. Caden's face appeared in newspapers, on billboards, online. Liana couldn't avoid it, but she refused to hide. When Eva asked if she wanted the office blinds closed, Liana said, "No, leave them open. I don't design in the dark anymore." That evening, Darius came by her office with dinner. He noticed her mood again, quieter, thoughtful but composed. "Rough day." "Not rough," she said, "just full of reminders." He nodded. "You don't have to pretend it doesn't sting." She sighed. "It doesn't sting. It's just strange watching someone who once knew you pretend they don't." "Then let him pretend," Darius said softly. "You don't owe him recognition." She looked up at him, something tender in her eyes. "You always know what to say." He smiled slightly. "That's because I'm saying what I needed to hear once too." They sat down, sharing dinner from paper boxes. No fancy plates, no formality. Just two people eating quietly under the soft hum of the lamp. Liana glanced at him and asked, "Do you ever think about what you'd say if you ran into your past?" Darius took a breath, thinking, "Nothing. I'd let silence do the talking." She smiled. "That's my plan too." He looked at her closely. "And if he tries harder, then I'll remind him," she said gently, "that peace isn't an invitation." Outside, rain started falling, steady and light. Darius stood to leave, but she stopped him. "Wait," she said softly. He turned. "Stay a little longer. I don't want to talk about him. I just want quiet that feels right." He nodded, sat back down. For a while, they listened to the rain. No words, no explanations. Only two hearts learning that sometimes love starts where conversation ends. It was a Friday evening when the knock came. Liana had just finished cleaning up the studio, music playing low in the background. Savannah's sunset filtered through the blinds in streaks of soft orange. She thought it was Darius. He often stopped by unannounced, bringing food or jokes about her overworking. But when she opened the door, her breath caught. Caden. He stood there, the same tailored poise, but his expression different. No arrogance, no charm, only something unfamiliar. Humility. "Liana," he said quietly. For a moment, neither moved. She stepped aside, not out of invitation but out of composure. "You can talk from there." He nodded, swallowing hard. "You look different." "I am." He smiled faintly, a sad curve of his lips. "I see that." For a few seconds, only the sound of the city filled the silence between them. Finally, he spoke. "I didn't come to make things harder," he said. "I came to say what I should have said a long time ago." Liana crossed her arms lightly. "Then say it." He inhaled, steadying himself. "I was selfish. I thought success meant love would wait for me. I thought you'd always be there." She didn't flinch. "I was, until I realized waiting wasn't love." Caden's jaw tightened. "I know, and I don't expect forgiveness. I just need to tell you that I see it now, what I did, what I lost." "You lost more than me," she said softly. "You lost the version of yourself that used to care." He looked down, exhaling. "You're right, and I've tried to change. I came here to start over, not with you, but with myself." She studied him quietly, her voice calm. "Then I hope you do, but don't bring your rebuilding to my door." He nodded slowly. "You've always been the steady one." She shook her head. "No, Caden, I was the silent one. There's a difference." He looked up again, eyes full of regret. "I saw you the other night," he said. "With him." "Darius," she said simply. He nodded. "He seems like a good man." "He is." Caden hesitated, then asked quietly, "Does he make you happy?" Liana met his gaze without hesitation. "He makes me peaceful. Happiness comes and goes. Peace stays." That answer struck him harder than she expected. He blinked a few times, then looked away. "I deserve that," he said after a moment. "You do," she said. "You deserve to grow, but not from my forgiveness, from your reflection." He nodded again, slower this time. I didn't come for forgiveness. I came for truth. She tilted her head slightly. And what truth is that? That you were the only person who ever looked at me like I was human, not a brand. Her voice softened. Then I hope you start seeing yourself that way too. He looked around her studio. Sketches, paint samples, stacks of design books. This place feels alive, he said quietly. It is, she replied. It's what love looks like when it's not waiting to be returned. Caden smiled faintly, pain behind his eyes. You always had a way with words. They're lighter now, she said. They don't carry sorrow anymore. He nodded slowly, stepped back toward the door. I won't bother you again. I promise. She looked at him for a long moment, then said softly, Caden. He stopped. Thank you for finally saying it. He turned, eyes glassy but steady. Goodbye, Liana. She nodded. Goodbye. When he walked away, she didn't cry. No tremble, no hesitation, only the soft weight of release. Minutes later, Darius arrived, right on cue, holding 2 cups of coffee and a small box of takeout. He stopped when he saw her expression. He was here, wasn't he? She nodded. He said goodbye. Darius set the food down quietly. Do you want to talk about it? She thought for a moment, then shook her head. There's nothing left to say. It's strange, though. What is? How silence used to hurt. Now it feels like closure. He nodded slowly. That's how you know it's over. They sat together on the couch, the soft hum of the city outside. For a while, they didn't speak. Then Darius reached over and took her hand. You okay? She nodded. More than okay. He smiled faintly. You sure? She looked at him, eyes warm and sure. I'm sure. I thought seeing him again would bring back the pain. Instead, it showed me how far I've come. He squeezed her hand gently. You've come far, Liana. But I think this is just the beginning. Later that night, as she lay in bed, she stared at the ceiling. The same way she had in Chicago years ago, but everything was different now. No waiting, no wondering, no ache, just peace. She turned toward the window, the moonlight spilling across her sheets, and whispered, Closure isn't always a conversation. Sometimes it's a calm heart. The next morning, Darius picked her up for work as usual. He glanced at her as she buckled in. Sleep well? She smiled. For the first time, yes. They drove in comfortable silence, music playing softly between them. At a red light, he looked over. You're quiet. Peacefully quiet, she said. It's different. He nodded, smiling. Then keep it that way. When they reached the office, she turned to him before stepping out. Thank you, she said softly. For what? For never asking me to rush my healing. He smiled gently. Love isn't supposed to hurry you. It's supposed to walk beside you. She looked at him, eyes steady, heart open, and said, Then keep walking. That evening, after work, she passed by the river, the same spot where she once promised herself she'd rebuild her life. The sun was setting again, painting the sky in soft orange and pink. Her reflection shimmered on the water, calm, whole, certain. She whispered quietly, Peace looks good on me. Then she smiled, not for the past, but for everything still ahead. It was Sunday morning when Liana realized her heart had shifted. Not dramatically, not with fireworks, but with peace that settled deep. She woke to sunlight on her sheets, birds outside the window, and the quiet hum of life that no longer felt heavy. Her phone buzzed. Darius, I'm outside. Don't panic. I brought breakfast. She smiled, slipped on her robe, and opened the door. He stood there with 2 paper bags, and that calm smile she'd come to rely on. Croissant, he said, and the good coffee from that place you love. You didn't have to, she said. I wanted to, he replied, stepping inside. They sat by her kitchen island, sunlight spilling between them. No rush, no expectations. You seem lighter, he said, watching her unwrap her pastry. I feel lighter, she replied. Yesterday felt like closing a book I didn't know I was still carrying. He nodded. Closure looks good on you. She smiled. You always know what to say. He sipped his coffee, eyes steady on hers. Maybe because you make it easy to be honest. Her laughter softened the air. You should write that down. That's a good line. He shrugged lightly. I don't need to. I meant it. After breakfast, they decided to drive to the coast. No plans, no meetings, just a day away from the noise. The road curved through tall trees and quiet stretches of land. The air smelled like salt and freedom. At a red light, Darius glanced at her. You okay? She nodded, looking out the window. I'm more than okay. I used to think peace was loneliness. Now I know it's space. Space for what? For something new to grow, she said softly. He smiled. Then let's grow something good. They reached the beach just before noon. The waves rolled in, soft and steady, brushing against the sand with a rhythm that felt alive. Liana took off her sandals and walked near the water, the cool waves brushing her toes. Darius followed, hands in his pockets. This place feels like you, he said. She turned. What do you mean? Beautiful, he said simply, but calm in a way that scares people who only know chaos. She smiled faintly. You see too much. Maybe, he said. But I like what I see. They walked for a while, talking about work, about the future, about small things that mattered and big things that didn't. Then, without planning it, they stopped at a small cafe by the water. It was quiet, with old wooden tables and handwritten menus. They sat by the window, and the view framed them perfectly. The sea behind them, the sunlight soft on their faces. Darius leaned forward, elbows on the table. Can I ask something? Go ahead. When you left Chicago, he said, did you think you'd love again? She smiled faintly. No, I thought love was something that only came once. And when it ended, that was it. And now, she looked out the window. Now I think love isn't something that finds you. It's something that grows when peace gives it room. He nodded slowly. So, are we growing? Her lips curved into a soft smile. We're watering something. After lunch, they walked along the pier, the boards creaking beneath their steps. He reached for her hand, not to pull, not to claim, just to hold. It fit easily. She looked at him. You're patient. I learned from someone strong, he said. Her chest warmed. You mean stubborn? He laughed. Both. The drive back was quiet, but it was the kind of quiet that felt full. Music played low, wind moving through the car. At one point, she turned to him. Darius, do you believe in second chances? He nodded. I do. But not the kind that ask for the same ending. She smiled softly. I like that. Good, he said, because that's what this feels like. Not a repeat, but a rewrite. Back in Savannah, the sun was setting. He walked her to her door as always. You sure you're not tired of driving me everywhere? She teased. He grinned. Not yet. Ask me again in 20 years. She laughed, then paused, eyes softening. You're good to me, Darius. He shrugged lightly. You deserve good. Their eyes met, steady, quiet, deep. He didn't move closer. He waited. Liana took a slow breath. I'm still learning how to be loved softly. He smiled gently. Then, I'll take my time. She nodded once, almost whispering. Don't rush. I want to remember every part of this. That night, she couldn't sleep. Not because of pain, because of peace that felt new. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about his laugh, his calm, the way he never tried to fix her, just stayed while she rebuilt herself. Her heart didn't race. It rested. And for the first time in years, rest felt like love. The next morning, she arrived at work early. Ava greeted her with a smile. You're glowing. Should I ask why? Liana laughed softly. Maybe I finally slept. Sure, Eva said, grinning. We'll call it that. As the day went on, clients came and went, calls were made, plans reviewed, but through it all, Liana carried something quiet beneath her professional calm, warmth. A life rebuilt not from revenge or regret, but from rediscovery. That evening, Darius sent her a message. Dinner tomorrow night. No work talk, just us. She typed back, smiling. Only if you let me choose dessert. Deal. When she closed her laptop, she whispered to herself, "This is what healing feels like. Steady, safe, and sweet." She didn't need to prove she'd moved on. She already had, and in the gentle rhythm of her new life, love wasn't a promise. It was a presence. Dinner was at Darius's home, simple, warm, and personal. When Liana arrived, soft music played in the background, the lights dim but golden. He stood by the counter, sleeves rolled up, finishing a sauce that smelled like rosemary and garlic. "You weren't kidding about cooking," she said, smiling as she stepped in. He turned, grin soft and familiar. "I told you. I follow instructions. Most of the time." She looked around. His home reflected him. Calm tones, clean lines, art pieces that told quiet stories. It wasn't loud money. It was lived-in peace. "I love your place," she said. He handed her a glass of wine. "It's better now that you're here." She laughed softly, shaking her head. "You always say things like that so casually." "I don't mean them casually," he said. They ate on the balcony, the air cool, the city lights flickering beneath them. Conversation flowed easily, about work, travel, favorite childhood foods. Then, silence settled, not awkward, not empty, just still. Darius leaned back in his chair, eyes thoughtful. "You know what I like about you, Liana?" She smiled faintly. "That I design well." "That too," he said. "But mostly that you never perform. You just are." She looked down, her voice quiet. "I spent years performing peace. Now I don't have to." He nodded slowly. "You don't. Not with me." After dinner, they moved inside. The living room glowed softly under the warm light of a single floor lamp. A record played low, jazz, mellow and deep. Liana walked around, her fingertips tracing the edge of a wooden table. "This feels like home," she said quietly. "It's supposed to," he replied, even for someone who didn't know she needed one. She turned to him, smiling. "You sound like you're designing a love story." He stepped closer. "Maybe the first, For a moment, neither spoke. The air thickened with quiet awareness. He didn't rush. He never did. He stood close enough for her to feel his warmth, but far enough to let her decide what came next. Liana looked up at him, eyes searching, open. "You make it easy to forget the past," she whispered. He shook his head softly. "I don't want you to forget it. I want you to remember it and still choose something better." Her breath caught. "That's what this is, isn't it?" she said. "Better." He smiled faintly. "That's the plan." She moved closer, her hand brushing his chest, resting there gently. For a long second, he didn't move. He let her lead. "You're patient," she said. "You're worth waiting for," he replied. She smiled, small and certain. "You're not like him." He shook his head. "I never wanted to be." Her voice dropped, soft as a secret. "That's why you are." The record changed songs. She leaned her head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. Steady, calm, safe, no tension, no hesitation. Just two people standing in the middle of a life they both chose to rebuild. He wrapped his arms around her, slow and protective. "Are you sure?" he asked quietly. She nodded. "I've never been more sure." They sat together on the couch after a while, still holding on. The city hummed outside. The night stretched quiet and long. Liana looked up at him, eyes soft. "I used to think love had to hurt to mean something." He traced his thumb across her knuckles. "And now I know love feels like peace that doesn't ask for proof." He smiled, whispering, "Then you finally found it." Time slipped by, unnoticed. They talked until their voices turned to murmurs, about fears, about dreams, about everything they hadn't said out loud before. When she laughed, it was unguarded. When he looked at her, it was like he'd found something he didn't know he was missing. She leaned closer, their foreheads touching lightly. "This feels new," she whispered. "It is," he said softly. "But it's real." Later, when he walked her to the door, she paused, turning to him. Her eyes glimmered under the soft porch light. "Tonight felt safe," she said. He smiled, brushing her hand gently. "That's the only kind of night I want you to have." She nodded, her chest rising with quiet emotion. "You have no idea what that means to me." He looked at her, voice low. "I think I do." She stood still for a second, then leaned in, pressing her lips softly to his cheek. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't uncertain. It was a beginning. When she got home, she sat on the edge of her bed, shoes still on, heart steady. There was no guilt, no fear, only gratitude for the love that waited until she was ready. She whispered to herself, "He didn't heal me. He reminded me I could." And with that, she smiled, the kind that came from deep peace. The next morning, she found a message from Darius. "Sleep well? Better than ever," she typed. "Good. Then we're starting right." She stared at the words for a long moment, then wrote back, "Yes, we are." As the city woke outside her window, she knew something simple and powerful. Love wasn't about replacing what was lost. It was about recognizing what was still possible. And in that moment, she knew she had finally chosen love that didn't need fixing. If you've ever learned to love again after being broken, tell me in the comments. Was it hard to trust, or did peace make room for love to return? Someone out there needs to hear your story tonight. And if this chapter touched your heart, take a second to like, share, and subscribe. Because here on Mr. Charles Stories, every story reminds us, healing isn't the end, it's the beginning. By spring, Savannah had begun to bloom. The air carried warmth again, and flowers filled the streets with color. So did Liana. Her firm had just been featured in a regional magazine for design innovation, with her photo smiling on the cover, confident, composed, radiant. The caption read, "The woman who redefined serenity in spaces." Darius had sent her a copy that morning with a note. "Told you, peace looks good on you." She'd laughed, blushing quietly before tucking it into her bag. That evening, they attended a local business gala together, her first public event in months. It wasn't about money or fame this time. It was about presence, being seen, not as someone's wife, not as someone's loss, but as herself. When she arrived with Darius, heads turned, not because of extravagance, because of ease. She wore a deep emerald dress that moved like water when she walked. He stood beside her in a dark suit, quiet confidence radiating without trying. "Ready?" he asked softly as they entered. She smiled. "More than ready." The room was full of familiar faces, local business owners, designers, developers. Compliments came easily. "Your work on the lake house was breathtaking. Savannah needed someone like you." Each kind word felt different now. She wasn't hearing praise through pain anymore. She was hearing it through peace. Halfway through the night, a woman approached. Elegant, mid-30s, familiar. It took Liana a moment to recognize her. Elise, Caden's former head of marketing. "Liana," Elise said with a polite smile. "I wasn't sure if it was you." Liana returned the smile calmly. "It's been a while." "Yes," Elise said. "I heard you moved here. Congratulations on the feature. It's well deserved." "Thank you," Liana said. Elise hesitated, lowering her voice slightly. "I'm with the new Hartman branch now. Caden's expanding fast. He mentioned he'd seen you recently." Liana's tone stayed even. Briefly, Elise nodded. "He seems different, maybe," Liana said gently. "But I'm not the one who needs to notice that anymore." Elise smiled faintly, reading the meaning between her words. "You look happy." "I am," Liana said simply. Darius joined them, hand resting at the small of her back, quiet, protective. "Everything okay?" he asked. Liana nodded. "Perfect." Elise smiled at them both, eyes soft with respect. "Then I'll let you enjoy your night." As Elise walked away, Darius leaned closer. "Old colleague, old reminder," Liana said. He smiled. "Handled gracefully." She laughed softly. "I had practice." The night continued, full of laughter, clinking glasses, and music. Darius watched her move through the room, calm, self-assured, light. She was no longer shadowed by her past. She was leading her own story. When they stepped outside later for air, the night was cool, the city lights reflecting on the quiet river nearby. Darius took her hand. "You know, I think tonight was more than a gala for you." She looked up at him. "What do you mean?" "It was closure," he said. "The kind that doesn't come in words, just in how you stand now." She smiled softly. "Maybe you're right. Maybe," he teased. "Fine," she said, laughing quietly. "You're right." They stood in silence for a while, listening to the water and distant music. Liana turned to him, her voice thoughtful. "Do you ever wonder how people see us?" He shook his head. "I only care about how you see me." "And how do you think that is?" He took a breath, eyes holding hers. "I think you see me clearly, the way you see everything worth keeping." She smiled faintly. "You're getting too good at this." He grinned. "It's your fault. You make honesty sound easy." Later, when he drove her home, the car was quiet except for the soft hum of the radio. She leaned her head against the window, city lights streaking past. He glanced at her. "You look peaceful." "I am," she said. "For a long time, I thought peace meant being untouched. Now I know it means being unshaken." He nodded slowly. "That's a strong kind of peace. The only kind worth keeping," she said softly. When they reached her apartment, he walked her to the door as usual. The hallway was quiet, the faint scent of jasmine from the neighbor's plant drifting through the air. "Thank you for tonight," she said. "For what?" "For letting me stand next to you, not behind you." He smiled gently. "That's the only place you'll ever stand." She looked at him for a long moment, her voice lowering. "You know, I think I'm falling for you." He didn't look surprised. He simply stepped closer, his tone low and steady. "Then I'll catch you softly." She smiled, her heart steady but full. He reached up, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I won't rush you," he said. "Love deserves time." She nodded. "I know. That's why I trust you." For a moment they stood there, quiet, close, the world narrowing to breath and heartbeat. Then she leaned forward, kissed him gently, soft, sure, unhurried. It wasn't about proving anything. It was about peace finally finding a place to rest. When she stepped inside after he left, she didn't feel nervous. She felt ready. Her reflection in the window smiled back, not a woman defined by what she lost, but one grateful for what she found, herself. She whispered quietly, "This time, I'll build love like I build my spaces. Steady, honest, warm." Morning light streamed through the curtains of Liana's apartment. Her phone buzzed softly, a message from Darius. "Breakfast? My treat. And yes, I'm bringing the good croissants again." She smiled to herself, tying her robe as the smell of fresh coffee filled her kitchen. Some mornings used to start with silence that felt heavy. Now, silence felt like comfort, the kind that carried meaning without words. They met at their favorite cafe by the river. He was already there, leaning against the counter, 2 cups in hand. "Good morning," he said, that calm voice wrapping around her like sunlight. "Morning," she replied, her smile soft but unguarded. He handed her a cup. "Same order as always. You remember everything," she teased. He shrugged lightly. "When it matters, I do." They sat by the window, the sound of water and morning chatter filling the air. For a while, they didn't talk about work or plans, just life. He told her about his niece learning to ride a bike. She told him about a client who cried after seeing her finished home. Simple things, small joys. That's how love built itself, piece by piece, moment by moment. After breakfast, they took a walk along the boardwalk. The sun was gentle, and a cool breeze carried the scent of the sea. Darius slowed his pace, glancing at her. "You've been quiet." She smiled faintly. "Peaceful quiet or worried quiet?" "Peaceful," he said. "But I know you're thinking face." She laughed softly. "I was just realizing something." "What's that?" "That it's easy to fall for you." He smiled, stopping mid-step. Then don't stop. They sat on a nearby bench overlooking the water. He took her hand. Slow, steady, deliberate. Liana, he said quietly, you know I won't ever ask you to forget where you came from. But I want you to know, you never have to face it alone again. She looked at him, eyes shining. You already proved that. Maybe, he said. But I'll keep proving it every day. She leaned her head against his shoulder, letting the sound of the waves fill the silence. Her voice came out soft. You don't understand what that means to me. He turned slightly, kissing the top of her head. I do. I've watched you rebuild everything with grace. I just want to make sure no one ever tears it down again. Not even you. That night, she invited him over for dinner. She cooked her favorite meal, something simple but special, lemon pasta and grilled vegetables. When he arrived, he brought flowers, white tulips, calm and clean. She smiled, arranging them on the table. You're consistent. I like patterns that bring peace, he said. They ate, talked, and laughed about childhood memories. Hers full of books and quiet spaces, his full of tools and small-town summers. At one point, she said, you know, you make everything feel easy. That's what peace does, he replied. After dinner, they sat on the couch, a quiet playlist humming softly in the background. Her head rested on his shoulder. He ran his fingers lightly over her hand, tracing invisible lines. No rush, no pressure, just presence. She looked up at him, eyes tender. You don't push. You just wait. He smiled. I waited for the right kind of love, the kind that doesn't need proving. Her breath caught. And you found it? He nodded. I did. She shifted slightly, turning toward him. You make me feel safe. His voice dropped lower. That's all I ever wanted to do. Their faces were close now, close enough to feel the warmth between them, close enough for silence to say everything words couldn't. When he leaned in, it wasn't about desire alone. It was about connection. Their kiss was soft, slow, and certain. Her fingers brushed against his jaw. His hand rested gently at her waist. No hurry, no noise. Just the sound of hearts that had learned how to beat without fear. They stayed that way for a while, wrapped in stillness. When they pulled apart, she whispered, I didn't think love could be quiet. He smiled, thumb tracing her cheek. Quiet love lasts the longest. She nodded, leaning into his touch. Then let's keep it that way. Later, they sat side by side, watching the city lights outside her window. He turned to her, voice steady. You know what I realized tonight? What? That peace and passion aren't opposites. When you find the right person, they live in the same space. She smiled, eyes soft. You sound like you're designing poetry now. He laughed quietly. Maybe. But it feels true. It is, she said. You're the calm I didn't know I needed, and the warmth I stopped believing in. He kissed her hand. Then let's promise something. What kind of promise? No more chasing closure, no more proving worth. Just living together with peace. She looked at him, her voice barely above a whisper. Deal. When he left that night, the air outside smelled like jasmine and rain. She stood at the window long after, her chest full, her soul quiet. There was no longing, no ache, just the sweet calm of knowing that love, when right, doesn't take your breath away, it teaches you how to breathe again. Spring turned to early summer, and Savannah's streets filled with music, warm air, and slow evenings. For Liana, life had found a rhythm she didn't know she was capable of keeping. Work was thriving. Her design firm had just secured a major contract, a new urban housing project, aimed at helping low-income families create warm, beautiful homes on a budget. It wasn't her biggest deal. It was her most meaningful one. She'd spent weeks drafting the plans, late nights spent sketching by the window. Sometimes Darius would sit nearby, working on his own drawings, quiet but present. They didn't need to fill every moment with words. Sometimes, love looked like shared silence and coffee cups half empty on the table. One evening, as the two reviewed blueprints on her office floor, Darius leaned back, watching her with quiet admiration. You know, he said, when you're focused, you bite your lip. She blinked, caught off guard. Do the first. Yeah, he said, smiling. It's distracting. She laughed, shaking her head. Don't start. I'm serious, he said softly. You look happy. She looked down at her sketches, her voice warm. I am. He tilted his head slightly. When was the last time you could say that and mean it? Now, she said simply. Their relationship had become steady and visible, no secrets, no pretending. People around them could see the quiet connection that held them together. Her assistant teased her once, saying, You smile before every meeting now. That's new. Liana had only replied, Maybe life finally caught up to my heart. One afternoon, Darius took her to a construction site near the edge of the city, a half-finished building overlooking the water. This is my next big project, he said. A community space for artists, small businesses and designers. She looked around at the open structure, beams catching sunlight, the smell of fresh wood and salt in the air. It's beautiful, she said. What made you start it? He glanced at her. You. She blinked. Me. You made me realize spaces should feel alive. Not perfect. I want this place to remind people that they don't have to be finished to be worthy. Her throat tightened. That's one of the kindest things anyone's ever said to me. He smiled faintly. Then let's make it ours. Your firm handles the interior design. We'll build it together. Her heart swelled. You mean it? I do, he said. I trust your vision, and us. That night, she sat by her balcony, the warm air brushing her skin, her thoughts full. For years she'd associated love with uncertainty, waiting for someone to remember her. Now, it felt like partnership. It felt like home. But peace, no matter how deep, always faces small tests. 2 weeks later, while she was finalizing a client presentation, an unexpected email appeared in her inbox. Subject line, Hartman Holdings request for collaboration. Her stomach tightened. The message was formal, polite, signed by the company's regional manager. They were inviting her firm to submit a bid for a new design partnership. She stared at the name, Caden's Company. For a long moment, she didn't move. Old memories brushed against her calm like a chill draft under a closed door. That evening, she told Darius over dinner. He listened quietly, not interrupting. When she finished, he asked, What are you thinking? She stirred her fork slowly. I'm thinking, I don't want to run from my past anymore. I worked hard for this firm, and my name, my work, deserves to stand in the same room, even if it means standing across from him. He nodded slowly. Then you should do it. She looked up, surprised. You're not worried? He smiled faintly. No, because I trust you, and because you're not the woman who left Chicago. You're the woman who rebuilt herself. Her eyes softened. You always say the right thing. He shook his head. No, I just mean it. The next morning she drafted a short but professional response. Thank you for the opportunity. My firm would be happy to review the details and discuss possible collaboration. No emotion, no hesitation, just business. She hit send and exhaled. That was growth. Not running, not reacting, just standing steady. A week later, she walked into a boardroom downtown, presentation folder in hand. Her heart stayed calm, even when she saw the familiar nameplate at the end of the table. Caden Hartman, founder, Hartman Holdings. He looked up when she entered, eyes widening but face composed. She smiled politely. Mr. Hartman, Ms. Avery, he said, his tone measured. It's been a while. Years, she said, taking her seat. Let's talk design. The meeting lasted 40 minutes. Professional. Clean. He tried once or twice to steer the conversation toward the personal, but she redirected with precision. When it ended, he said quietly, You've changed. She looked him in the eye. That was the point. Outside the building, she stood for a moment, the breeze catching her hair. She felt nothing sharp, no ache, no anger, only release. When she turned her phone back on, a message from Darius waited. How did it go? She typed back, peacefully. That's my girl, he replied. Her lips curved into a smile. That evening, She drove to his house. When he opened the door, she didn't say a word. She walked straight to him and wrapped her arms around his waist. He held her close, his chin resting on her hair. "You okay?" She nodded against his chest. "More than okay. I think I finally closed every door behind me." He smiled. "Good. Then we can start opening new ones." They sat on the porch, the night air warm, fireflies blinking across the garden. Liana leaned against him, her voice soft. "You know what I realized?" "What?" "That peace isn't about the absence of pain, it's about presence, the kind that stays even when tested." He kissed the side of her head. "Then you've mastered it." She smiled faintly. "Maybe I'm just learning to let good things stay." The following month moved like sunlight through open curtains, calm, warm, and full of meaning. The project they'd started together, the community space by the water, was finally taking shape. Each morning, Liana walked through the site in her boots, clipboard in hand, while Darius coordinated the team. They'd share glances across the noise and movement, their connections steady even amid the chaos. Sometimes, when the workers took lunch, they'd sit together on the edge of the unfinished deck, feet dangling, coffee cups in hand. "This feels bigger than a building," she said one afternoon. Darius nodded. "It is. It's proof that peace can build something lasting." She smiled softly. "Then maybe that's what we're doing too." He turned, meeting her gaze. "We are." In the evenings, they'd walk home together, tired but content. He'd stop to buy her favorite ice cream from the small shop near the corner. She'd tease him for always choosing vanilla. He'd reply, "Consistency is a love language." Sometimes they talked about work. Sometimes they talked about childhood memories or their dreams for the future. And sometimes they didn't talk at all. Love lived in the quiet between sentences. One night, as they were reviewing plans in her living room, Darius looked up from his notes. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." He hesitated, his tone gentle. "Do you ever worry this could disappear?" She blinked. "What do you mean?" "This peace," he said softly. "This thing we have. Sometimes I wonder if we're too lucky, like life might notice and take it back." She paused, studying his face. He wasn't being dramatic, he was being honest, vulnerable. She reached across the table, her fingers brushing his hand. "You don't lose what's built on truth, Darius. We didn't steal this peace. We earned it." He smiled faintly. "You make everything sound steady." "That's because it is," she said. "We're not perfect, but we're real. And real doesn't vanish. It grows." He turned his hand, interlocking his fingers with hers. "Then let's keep growing." The weeks that followed were filled with progress and laughter. Darius's construction team began calling her boss Lady after she caught a design flaw that saved them hours of work. She pretended to hate the nickname, but Darius knew she secretly liked it. "You run this site better than I do," he said one day. She grinned. "Don't worry. I'll let you keep your title." "You're too generous," he teased. By midsummer, their project neared completion. The building's walls gleamed in the sunlight, wide windows framing the river beyond. Inside, her designs had turned concrete and wood into something warm, a reflection of both of them. "It's perfect," he said, looking around the nearly finished space. She smiled. "Not perfect, honest." He nodded. "Even better." They stood there for a while, the hum of the river outside blending with the soft sounds of their breathing. Liana turned to him, voice quiet. "You know what scares me sometimes?" "What?" "How easy this feels. I spent so long fighting for love that peace almost feels suspicious." He stepped closer, touching her cheek lightly. "Then let's keep proving peace is safe." Her eyes softened. "You think it'll last?" He smiled faintly. "I think anything you build with care does." That night, she cooked dinner for both of them, her place filled with soft music and candlelight. They ate slowly, laughing between bites, sharing small stories about the day. Afterward, she stood at the sink, washing dishes, lost in thought. Darius came up behind her, drying a plate. "You look far away," he said. "Just thinking," she murmured. about how strange it feels to be this happy. He set the towel down and wrapped his arms around her waist from behind. Don't overthink peace, Liana. Just live in it. She turned, leaning against the counter, eyes searching his. You make it sound simple. He smiled softly. That's because the right love is... They moved to the couch, talking until the night grew late. Her head rested against his chest, his fingers tracing slow circles along her back. Darius, she said quietly. Yeah? I think I'm ready for the next step. He paused, looking down at her. Next step? She smiled. Sharing keys. He blinked. You mean... I mean, you spend half your time here anyway, she said. Might as well make it official. His laugh was quiet, full of warmth. I thought you'd never ask. Don't make me regret it, she teased. He kissed her forehead. Never. 2 days later, he handed her a small silver keychain with their initials engraved on it. For your set, he said. She ran her thumb over the letters. You thought of everything. I try, he said. Now it's official. No more knocking. She smiled. Only for breakfast deliveries. Always, he promised. That weekend, they celebrated by spending a day at the nearly finished community center. They walked through the halls hand in hand, imagining what it would look like filled with people, art and music. At one point, she stopped and turned toward him. Do you realize what we built? He nodded. A space for others to find what we found, a beginning after the storm. She smiled, eyes glimmering. You sound like a poet again. He chuckled softly. You bring it out of me. That evening, back at home, Liana stood by the window, watching the sunset spill across the river. Darius came up behind her, wrapping his arms gently around her. This view never gets old, she whispered. Neither do you, he said. She laughed softly. You're getting smooth. I'm getting honest, he replied. They stayed like that, quiet, steady, safe. She turned in his arms, resting her hands on his chest. I think I'm done looking back, she said softly. He smiled. Good, because the view ahead looks beautiful. She leaned forward and kissed him. Slow and certain, the kind of kiss that didn't need promises, only presence. Outside, the city lights flickered to life. Inside, their hearts moved in rhythm. No rush, no fear, just love built brick by brick, moment by moment. It wasn't a fairy tale. It was something better. It was real. The morning of the grand opening began with sunlight spilling across the Savannah River. Liana stood by the glass doors of the new community center, the place she and Darius had dreamed, designed, and built from the ground up. It wasn't just a building. It was a heartbeat, full of color, art, and light. The sign above the entrance read, The Haven. Simple, honest, a space for new beginnings, much like the one she had found. Darius walked up behind her, his arm brushing hers. You ready? He asked. She smiled, eyes glistening. I've been ready since the first brick. He laughed softly. You said that about our first dinner too. She looked up at him, teasing. I was right both times. He nodded. You always are. Guests began arriving. Local business owners, families, artists and neighbors. Reporters stood near the stage, cameras ready. Eva, her assistant, was moving through the crowd, making sure everything ran smoothly. You look beautiful, she said to Liana before darting off again. Liana touched her simple white dress, smiling. Thank you. Peace looks good on everyone. When it was time for speeches, Darius stepped up first. He spoke with his usual calm, the kind that drew people in without trying. This project started as an idea, he said. But ideas only grow when someone believes in them enough to build. Liana did that. She took the bones of a structure and gave it soul. The Haven isn't just ours, it's yours. For anyone starting over, for anyone who needs a place to breathe again, this is home. Applause filled the hall. Liana's heart swelled. When he turned toward her and gestured, "Your turn," she stepped up to the podium, steady but emotional. "Thank you," she began. "A few years ago, I lost everything I thought defined me: love, certainty, direction. I left Chicago believing I was broken, but peace has a way of rebuilding quietly. It finds you when you decide to stop shrinking. The haven is proof that pain can plant something beautiful if you let it. The room went silent, not out of discomfort but reverence. She continued softly, "We built this space to remind everyone that you don't need to be perfect to start again. You just need courage and kindness, especially for yourself." She looked over at Darius, eyes soft. "And the right people help you remember who you were meant to be." The applause this time was thunderous. After the ribbon was cut, music began playing, local artists performing, children running through the courtyard, laughter echoing between the walls. Liana walked through the rooms, touching the walls she'd painted, greeting guests who thanked her for what she'd built. A woman in her 40s stopped her, eyes wet. "My daughter starts her art class here next week," she said. "She's been through a hard time, but she smiled for the first time in months when she saw this place. You have no idea what this means." Liana's throat tightened. She reached for the woman's hand. "I do. That's why we built it." Later in the afternoon, she found Darius standing outside near the fountain. His sleeves were rolled up, his tie loose, his smile easy. "Busy day," he said. "The best kind," she replied. He watched her for a long moment, admiration in his eyes. "You realize this isn't just a building, right? This is your story written in walls and light." She looked up at the structure, the soft gold sunlight hitting the glass. "Maybe. But we wrote it together." He reached into his pocket. "Speaking of writing stories." Her brow lifted as he pulled out a small envelope. "What's that?" "Open it," he said. Inside was a certificate, official, embossed with her firm's name. She scanned it, confused for a moment, then looked up. You registered me as co-founder?" He smiled. "Of course. The haven belongs to both of us. Always was meant to." She blinked, emotions flooding quietly. "Darius." He took her hands, voice soft. "You taught me that peace isn't quiet. It's partnership. You built this. You built us. I just followed your lead." Tears gathered in her eyes. "You didn't have to do that." He smiled. "I wanted to. Because everything good I've built lately started with you." She didn't speak for a moment, just stepped forward, resting her head against his chest. The sounds of the celebration faded around them. "Do you know what this means to me?" she whispered. He kissed the top of her head. "I think I do." That evening, after everyone left, they walked through the now empty building. The lights glowed softly, reflecting against the glass and the water outside. Liana stopped near the entrance, her reflection overlapping with Darius's in the glass door. "It's beautiful," she said quietly. "So are you," he replied. She smiled, turning to him. "This is more than I dreamed." He nodded. "That's what happens when you stop surviving and start living." As they stepped outside, the night air felt different. Full, alive, peaceful. Darius wrapped his arm around her as they walked toward the car. "So," he said, "what's next?" She laughed softly. "Maybe a vacation." He grinned. "You? Pick the place." She looked up at him. "You'd go anywhere with me, wouldn't you?" "Anywhere peace leads us," he said. When they got home, she placed the certificate on her shelf beside. A framed sketch, the first design they'd ever worked on together. She ran her finger over the words "The Haven," then whispered, "This isn't just a building. It's proof I survived gently." That night, as she lay beside Darius, his arm draped across her waist, she realized something simple but powerful. Peace wasn't the absence of chaos. It was the presence of someone who helped her breathe through it. And this time, she wasn't dreaming of what could be. She was living it. The night after the opening felt different. The noise had faded, but the emotions lingered. Pride, gratitude, and a quiet awe neither could quite name. Liana stood by the window of her apartment, still wearing the soft white dress from the ceremony. The city glowed below, the river reflecting golden streaks of light. Behind her, Darius leaned against the doorframe, jacket off, sleeves rolled up, a quiet smile on his face. "You haven't stopped smiling since the ribbon cut," he said. She turned, laughing softly. "Maybe I forgot how." He walked closer, his voice low. "Don't forget again." They moved through the room slowly, like gravity knew where they belonged. "You did something incredible today," he said. I watched people walk through those doors like they were stepping into hope. Liana looked down, emotion catching in her chest. I wanted it to feel safe. Like the kind of place I once needed. It does, he said. You built something that heals. She met his eyes. We did. He shook his head gently. You led. I followed. They stood close now, close enough to feel the warmth radiating between them. The silence wasn't awkward. It pulsed with meaning. Liana took a slow breath. It's strange, Darius. I used to think closure came from someone's apology, but tonight I realized it comes from creation, from choosing to turn pain into purpose. He brushed a loose strand of hair from her face. And you did exactly that. She smiled faintly. You make it sound easy. You make it look easy, he said softly. But I know it wasn't. Her eyes shimmered under the dim light. It wasn't. But you stayed. You never made me rush my healing. He smiled, voice low. That's because your pace felt right. She stepped closer, resting her hands on his chest. You know what scares me? He tilted his head. What? How good this feels. How real it is. His hand slid gently to her waist. Then don't be scared. Real love shouldn't hurt. It should ground you. She looked up at him, voice soft. You've become home for me. And you, he said, became peace I never thought I'd find. For a moment, they simply looked at each other. Quiet, steady, unhurried. The city outside hummed, but inside, time slowed. He cupped her face with both hands, thumbs brushing her jawline, and said quietly, You don't have to say anything. I already know, she whispered. Say it anyway. He smiled. I love you. Her breath trembled, not from surprise, but relief. I love you too, she whispered back. He kissed her then, slow and deep, the kind of kiss that wasn't rushed or claimed, but given. It wasn't the start of something new, it was the recognition of something already built. Her fingers tangled in his shirt, his touch lingered along her back, not demanding, just holding, grounding her in the moment. Every heartbeat, every breath, every glance spoke the same truth. Peace could be passionate, and love could be calm. When they finally pulled apart, she rested her forehead against his. I used to think love meant giving up who I was to keep someone else, she said softly. But with you, I became more of myself. He smiled. That's what love's supposed to do. They moved to the couch, hands still intertwined. The soft hum of the night filled the silence around them. She leaned her head on his shoulder. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we'd met earlier? He shook his head. No. I think timing gave us perspective. We wouldn't have recognized this kind of love before. She smiled. You're right. We had to break to understand peace. He turned, his voice quiet. And now? She met his gaze. Now we build without fear. They sat like that for a long time, two souls who had known loss but chose softness anyway. Eventually, he stood and offered his hand. Come with me, he said. She raised a brow, smiling. Where are we going? Nowhere far, he said. Just here. He led her to the balcony. The air outside was cool, the city lights flickering below. Look, he said, pointing to the haven in the distance, glowing under the night sky. Liana's breath hitched. It's beautiful. So are you, he said quietly. That building, this view, everything, none of it compares to seeing you at peace. She looked up at him, eyes soft. You always know what to say. I don't rehearse, he said with a grin. You inspire good sentences. She laughed, the sound echoing softly through the night. They stood there together, leaning against the railing, her back to his chest, his arms wrapped around her. This feels like forever, she whispered. It can be, he said, if we keep choosing it. I will, she promised. He pressed his lips to her temple. So will I. Inside, the record player still played softly. They swayed gently to the music, no words, no need to explain what already lived between them. For Liana, this wasn't the kind of love that burned fast. It was the kind that stayed, safe, real, whole. Later, when they finally lay together, the world outside kept moving. But for them, time stood still. Every touch was gentle. Every breath was shared. It wasn't about escaping pain. It was about honoring how far they'd come. When her head rested against his chest, she whispered, "Thank you for showing me love can be quiet." He smiled against her hair. "Thank you for letting me in." And for the first time in years, both of them fell asleep without fear of losing what they'd found. 6 months after the haven opened, Savannah moved to a new rhythm. The center had become more than a community space. It was a living story, filled with laughter, children's voices, and quiet hope. Every time Liana walked through those glass doors, she saw pieces of herself in every corner. The sketches on the walls, the cozy reading room she'd designed for women starting over, the studio where local artists displayed their first works. She had built peace into a place, and every day it gave it back. That morning, she arrived early, coffee in hand before anyone else. She stood in the quiet lobby, sunlight streaming through the tall windows, her reflection faintly mirrored in the glass. "Still beautiful," came a voice behind her. She turned to find Darius standing at the entrance, his work jacket slung over one arm. "Are you talking about me or the building?" she asked, smiling. He walked closer, slipping an arm around her waist. "Both," she laughed softly. "You're biased." "Completely," he said. "And proud of it." They walked through the center together, checking details before a new batch of classes began. Everywhere they went, people waved or smiled. Students, volunteers, young designers she had begun mentoring. At one point, a little girl ran up and handed Liana a small paper flower. "Miss Liana, I made this for you," she said. Liana crouched down. "It's beautiful. What's it for?" "For helping my mommy smile again." Her voice caught slightly. "Thank you, sweetheart." The girl ran off again, her laughter filling the hallway. Darius watched, eyes soft. "You see what you've done?" She looked up at him. "We've done..." He shook his head. "You started it. I just made sure the light stayed on." She smiled faintly. "And you stayed when it mattered most." Later that afternoon, as she reviewed some upcoming designs in her office, Darius walked in, holding an envelope. "What's that?" she asked. He handed it over. "A letter came for you. Looks like Chicago." Her fingers hesitated before opening it. Inside was a typed note, short, formal, and unexpectedly kind. "Dear Liana, I visited the Haven last week. I didn't reach out because I didn't want to disturb what you've built. But I wanted to say, it's extraordinary. You're extraordinary. You were always meant to create things that heal. I didn't see it then, but I do now. Take care of yourself. You deserve the peace you found. Caden." She stared at it for a long moment. Quiet. Darius watched her expression carefully. "You okay?" She nodded slowly. "Yeah. I am." He tilted his head. "Sure?" She smiled softly. "That used to be a wound. Now it's a closed book." He reached over, taking the letter gently from her hands. "Want me to toss it?" She thought for a second, then nodded. "Yes." "Some things don't belong in the present." He smiled faintly, tearing the letter neatly and dropping it in the bin. "Consider it recycled into peace." She laughed. "You always know how to phrase things." That evening, they returned home to their shared apartment, warm lights, soft music, and the quiet rhythm of two lives that fit together. Liana cooked while Darius set the table, humming quietly to himself. "You're off-key," she teased. "I'm soulful," he countered. "You're something," she said, smirking. He walked over, kissed her temple. "Hungry?" "Always," she replied. They ate together, simple food, real conversation, no pretense. At one point Darius said, "You know, when I met you, you had walls taller than my buildings." She smiled. "And you climbed every one of them." "Still am," he said softly. She laughed. "You don't make it sound easy." He leaned closer. "The best things never are." After dinner, they sat on the couch with coffee mugs in hand, the faint glow of city lights painting the room gold. Liana leaned against him. Do you ever think about how far we've come? All the time, he said. You were the woman who thought peace was loneliness. I was the man who thought love was distraction. Turns out, we were both wrong. She smiled, eyes half closed. We found balance. He nodded. And it's my favorite kind of calm. Later that night, they walked to the balcony, the city breeze cool against their skin. The view stretched endlessly. Quiet streets, shimmering water, stars beginning to show. Liana turned to him, her expression tender. Do you ever get afraid it'll fade? He shook his head. No, because we work at it. Every day. She smiled softly. You're right. We build it like a home. Slow, steady, one good choice at a time. He kissed her hand. Exactly. They stood there, quiet and close, the kind of silence that speaks more than words ever could. For a moment, she looked back at the haven's direction in the distance, glowing faintly under the moonlight. Do you think peace lasts forever? She asked. He thought for a moment, then said, no, but the right people rebuild it every time it cracks. She smiled. Then we'll keep rebuilding. Always, he said, his voice sure and calm. When they went back inside, she paused at the framed photograph on their shelf. The ribbon-cutting day. She was laughing in the photo, sunlight across her face, Darius beside her. She whispered, we made it. He came up behind her, arms wrapping around her shoulders. We're still making it, he murmured. She nodded. And I wouldn't want it any other way. A year passed. Seasons turned. The haven thrived. Every wall, every corner of the building carried stories, laughter, tears, hope. It became a home for hundreds, but for Liana, it was something deeper. It was proof that peace, once broken, could be rebuilt with grace. On a quiet Sunday morning, she sat on the porch of their new house, the one she and Darius had bought near the water. The smell of coffee mixed with the scent of jasmine from the garden. Birds called from nearby trees. She wore a soft robe, hair tied loosely, sketchbook open on her lap. The page in front of her wasn't a design plan. It was a drawing of the haven. Darius walked out with 2 mugs, barefoot and sleepy-eyed. You're sketching on a Sunday, he teased. She smiled. Habit. He set the mugs down and sat beside her. You still working on perfection? She shook her head. No, I'm drawing gratitude. He leaned closer. You're getting poetic again. She grinned. You started it. They sat together in silence for a while, the kind that felt like breathing. Then she said quietly, Do you ever think about how it all began? He nodded slowly. A dinner you didn't plan to crash. She laughed softly. You mean a table I wasn't supposed to sit at? And thank God you did, he said, because it led here. She looked down at the sketch, her smile fading into thought. It's strange. Back then I thought strength meant silence. But now I know. Strength is peace that doesn't need approval. He nodded. You taught me that. Inside the house, the phone rang softly. Liana got up to answer it. Liana Avery speaking. A familiar voice came through. Eva, her assistant. Guess what? The Haven just won the Regional Humanitarian Award. You and Darius are being honored next month. Liana froze for a second. Are you serious? Completely. They said the project redefined community architecture in Georgia. She smiled, warmth spreading through her chest. Thank you, Eva. I'll tell Darius. When she hung up, she turned to him. We won. He looked up from his coffee, confused. Won what? The regional award. For the Haven. His eyes widened slightly, then softened into a slow, proud smile. You did it. We did it, she said. He walked over, pulled her into a hug. You realize this is full circle, right? You left a world that didn't see you and built one that needed you. Her voice trembled softly. That's all I ever wanted. Later that evening, they visited the Haven together. The building was quiet. No students, no classes, only the hum of the lights. They walked down the hallway, their footsteps echoing faintly. In the main atrium, sunlight poured through the glass ceiling. Liana stopped, looking around. It still amazes me. Darius stood beside her. It should. You turned your pain into purpose. She turned toward him. No. We did. He smiled faintly. Then purpose looks beautiful on you. They wandered into the art room, where framed drawings from children lined the walls, some crooked, some colorful, all full of joy. Liana stopped in front of one small painting, a house with two people holding hands and a heart above it. Below it, written in uneven handwriting, were the words, "This is what happy looks like." Her throat tightened. "They get it," she whispered. Darius nodded. "They do. And they got it from you." When they left the building, dusk had settled. The river shimmered in the distance, wind warm against their faces. Darius opened the car door for her. "You realize we built something that'll outlast us?" She smiled. "That's the point." Back home, they ate dinner quietly, simple food, candlelight flickering between them. Afterward, they sat outside, watching fireflies drift lazily through the garden. Liana broke the silence first. "Do you ever feel guilty for being this happy?" He looked at her for a moment, then said, "No, because we didn't take it from anyone. We earned it, through patience, through honesty, through starting over." She smiled faintly. "It still surprises me sometimes." "That's good," he said. "That means you don't take it for granted." Later that night, as they lay in bed, Liana turned toward him. "I think peace is misunderstood," she said quietly. He opened his eyes. "How so?" "People think it's passive, like nothing happens there. But peace is active. It's a choice you make every day, to be kind, to forgive, to stay soft in a world that keeps testing you." He smiled faintly. "And you make that choice beautifully." She reached out, tracing his hand. "I learned it from watching you show up." He leaned in, his voice low. "We both showed up. That's what love is." They stayed quiet for a while, the night calm, the rhythm of their breathing in sync. Liana whispered, "Do you ever think about what people will remember about us?" He smiled in the dark. "Maybe that we built something with love and made peace look strong." She nodded slowly, closing her eyes. "Then that's enough." Morning came softly. She woke before him, sunlight spilling across their room. She looked at him, peaceful, steady, hers. For the first time, she didn't think about loss or regret or rebuilding. She thought about presence, about gratitude. She whispered, "Thank you, God, for bringing me home." In life, peace isn't found in wealth, revenge, or control. It's found in rebuilding without bitterness. It's choosing softness when the world expects hardness. It's learning to love without needing to be right. Liana's story reminds us, you can't heal where you were hurt, but you can build something beautiful with what's left. And when you do, love will find you quietly, respectfully, and for real. If you've ever loved someone who stopped seeing your worth, remember this: peace isn't found in fixing what broke you. It's found in walking away with grace and building a life that finally feels like home. Liana didn't get revenge. She got her peace. She didn't prove her value. She lived it. And sometimes, that's the quietest kind of victory. Tell me in the comments, have you ever walked away from someone you loved because you were tired of feeling unseen? Or maybe, like Liana, you learned that peace doesn't mean weakness. It means strength without noise. I want to hear your thoughts below. And if this story touched your heart tonight, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe so you never miss another story like this. Because here on Mr. Charles Stories, we don't just tell stories about love. We tell stories about growth, healing, and the power of choosing peace over pain. Stay kind, stay strong, and remember, the best love stories begin the moment you stop chasing what hurts you and start embracing what heals you.